A very good afternoon to you, Jane, and indeed to you at home. These are the top business stories live from the Sky Newsroom. Donald Trump has threatened members of the BRICS bloc that any country embracing anti-American policies will face an extra 10% tariff on their exports. 20 years on since the 7/7 attack, we'll speak to a security firm about how well protected today's cities are against terrorism. Plus, as new data suggests, some non-doms are leaving the UK, but they aren't quite ready yet to sell up their homes. Very good afternoon. On this Monday, it is Business Live with me, Darren McCaffrey. Donald Trump has threatened members of the BRICS bloc of nations that any country embracing anti-American policies will face an extra 10% on the tariffs. The threat comes as governments around the world prepare for the ending on the 90-day tariff pause on levies announced on so-called Liberation Day back in April, when Mr. Trump also imposed a baseline 10% tariff on the United States trading partners. Well, let's get more on this. Let's speak to Matthew Orsman, who has been involved in advising government on trade relations with the United States. Matthew, always a pleasure. Good afternoon to you. Just give us a sense of where we're at here, because it is incredibly confusing. We've got this deadline coming up, but we think it's been effectively delayed until, what, the end of the month?
Yes, thanks for having me, Darren. Yes, President Trump and his press team just announced today that they're going to be sending out letters telling countries about the new tariff rate that they should expect to be hit with, but that won't go into effect later this week, early next week, but sometime in August. This is really the Trump administration just buying more negotiating time. They've made progress, it appears, on some deals, obviously UK last week and Vietnam coming. But the others are still dancing around. So the Trump administration is trying to get itself more negotiating leverage and maneuverability. So we'll have some extra time on the clock to renegotiate these tariffs and see what deals can be made.
It's fascinating. You talked there about the UK and Vietnam, and as far as we know, they're pretty much the only two countries that have so far signed some sort of deal. And we know with others, Japan, the European Union, the world's largest trading bloc, these deals are proving pretty tricky.
Absolutely. They are real massive issues that can't be solved overnight. There are structural barriers to making significant trade changes in this system. There are subsidies, there are policies, there are regulatory barriers. If it was easy, it would have been done many years before. So in many cases, they're trying to jam a round peg in a square hole when it comes to renegotiating the scope of global trade and all the subsidiary parts. So this is hard, and it shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody that it's going to take more time.
Well, isn't that the point, Matthew? I mean, normally trade deals take years, sometimes even decades, between individual nation states. To try and do this with effectively the rest of the world in the space of a couple of months, frankly, seems crazy. Let's say bold. It's quite bold.
It's bold, and it's put the Trump administration in a tricky position because, on the one hand, they want to use the leverage of tariffs. It's the best shot they've got at getting the trade deals they feel that America needs. But at the same time, while the market has digested the trade war since April, it's fragile, and they're trying to do everything they can not to spark a trade, a stock market crash in the U.S. or spark any kind of debt concerns for the U.S., especially on the back of the big, beautiful bill.
Well, I mean, that's the point, isn't it? We saw, actually, one of the reasons Donald Trump stepped back the last time fundamentally was around the bond market and the possibility of soaring U.S. debt. But, Matthew, let's just briefly talk about the BRICS. It's Brazil, India, China, South Africa, and Russia, of course. And there is a bit of tension because it is clear they're trying to eke their way away from America to a degree, aren't they?
Absolutely. I mean, to borrow a phrase that used to be applied to APEC, I mean, it does seem to be 5 nouns in search of a verb. You know, these are 5 very different countries that have different agendas, different geopolitical outlook. But they are trying to carve out some sort of different space, trying to make the BRICS the inheritor of the non-aligned movement, and create some opportunities to create leverage and a bulwark against U.S. unilateral policy changes. However, I view sort of Donald Trump's threat to them earlier in the day in this context of the U.S. financial market stability. I think at its core, what he's concerned about is the U.S. Fragility on the bond markets, on currency, where the BRICS, as some of the largest holders of U.S. debt and some of the largest users of U.S. currency, could cause some problems for America if they decided to unify in that way.
Fascinating stuff. We're back talking about tariffs again, aren't we? Matthew, always a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed. Matthew Orsman there.
Thank you so much. Talk to you soon.
OK, let's have a look at how the markets are doing on this Monday afternoon. Delighted to say we can speak to Lucy Coutts, Director Investor at JM Fin. Lucy, good afternoon to you. Let's briefly talk about tariffs and Trump. I mean, it's quite difficult to get away from it, isn't it? Because it is having an impact on sterling, for example.
Yes, indeed. So sterling has sort of slightly strengthened, and it's a battle between two big heavyweights, Trump and Elon Musk, and it's really on the back of Trump's one big beautiful bill, and one is questioning really, why is Elon Musk now going to be possibly setting up a third political party. And I think we need to look at what the bill contains. So it's not in Elon Musk's interests. So we've got a removal of purchase tax credits for EV vehicles. It eliminates the need for traditional manufacturers to purchase EV credits, which accounted for 100% of Tesla's quarterly profits. And it also removes credit for battery storage systems. And that's negatively impacting on actually what's been Tesla's growth driver. So as a result, Tesla's share price has slumped today. It's down 7%. And so it just adds to really a poor year for Tesla shareholders.
And there will be many of them, and Donald Trump's alluded to this, hasn't he, who frankly do think, actually, Elon, stop talking about politics. Stop sticking your nose in politics, get back to business, because, frankly, you're doing damage to your own companies.
Yeah, exactly. So his political career, if it ever comes to fruition, is really at odds with the wishes of his shareholders. But, Musk has almost limitless funds, and he seems to be laying down a longer-term commitment to politics. But I think it's probably, and this is sort of a bold personal statement, but I think it's probably more he's angry at the big bill, and he's just laying down a marker in the sand, and let's see what happens.
Let's talk about Shell, of course, massive oil company, and their quarterly earnings have been hit, haven't they?
Yeah, they have. So it's one of its biggest profit drivers is its trading operations from its oil and gas operations. And because of the volatility in the oil price over recent months, which isn't about supply and demand, it's actually about geopolitical events. So Trump's sort of tariffs, attacks on Iran, OPEC increased production, which again we've seen more of this weekend. It makes that trading arm a little bit more difficult to predict, and so they have suffered as a result. But it's worse than analysts had thought.
And this is a time, of course, which, we've had renewed speculation, haven't we, about whether Shell might consume BP.
Yeah, indeed. So they have denied that, but I think it's also perhaps bringing to the fore again, whether it's going to sort of remain listed in the UK or whether it is going to sort of bring higher up the agenda a live discussion on whether it moves the listing to the US to get that valuation gap that it desperately seeks.
OK, Lucy, always appreciate your time and your insight live there from York. That's Lucy Coutts. Thank you very much. And don't forget, you can get more, of course, on the Money News. All you need to do is scan the QR code that hopefully is going to pop up on your screen right now. There it is, just on cue. That will take you through to the Sky News app, and you can get all the very latest money news on that. Now, it is 20 years since the 2005 London tube bombings, the deadliest attack on the British capital since World War II. And it did change London and, of course, the country forever, not just at least in terms of security. We've seen lots of bollards, fences and protections erected around our cities. And let's talk more about this with Richard Ellis. He's Managing Director at ATG Access. That's an urban security firm that's completed its first impact test for a bollard in the UK. Very good afternoon to you, Richard. And looking back on 20 years ago, a lot has changed, hasn't it? That event changed us, didn't it? It made us look yet again at security in a different way, because obviously through the 70s, 80s and 90s, there were attacks from the IRA. But what changed on 7/7 was the first time that suicide bombers had been used on the British mainland.
That's right. I mean, the threat is ever-changing and the environment itself is ever-changing. So that was almost a flagstone event which really triggered a different approach, not only to terrorism itself, but also the way that companies such as ourselves and their security services react to it and try and preempt issues and innovate to overcome and mitigate certain issues from occurring in the future.
And part of that mitigation is clearly intelligence, but it's also physical infrastructure, isn't it, as well? And, it's been notable to all of us over the last 20 years, whether it's outside important buildings, courthouses, or even just busy streets. I mean, I think of the bridges in London, for example, now have got bollards after another terrorist attack to prevent cars being able to mount the pavements. There's been a big physical change to our urban landscapes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much. I mean, the use of vehicle as a weapon and vehicle-borne improvised explosive device in vehicles has completely changed the landscape. And clearly, we need to mitigate for that. And that's why you see critical national infrastructure and crowded spaces protected by bollards, potentially road blockers and other barriers and other systems really to, mitigate such, tragic attacks.
And how do you, Richard, kind of decide, what infrastructure is needed and what points? I mean, because sometimes some may feel that it's overdone a little bit, that, it's quite ugly, if you like.
Well, in the worst case, it could be, but we always believe that, physical security should always be a layered and proportionate approach. And we work very closely with security specialists, stakeholders, end users, of course. And as a manufacturer, we try and innovate to ensure that actually the aesthetics and the blend of what we provide really is an enhancement to the public realm and very much not creating a fortress-like approach. And certainly the installations that you see around London, proudly which many of ours, we go out of our way to try and ensure that is the case. So the last thing we want to do is create a ring of steel or a fortress type of approach, like I said. And in fact, the opposite, we want to be able to, through the product that's provided, reassure as opposed to restrict.
Yeah, and just finally on that, isn't that that's the difficulty though, isn't it? Because many of our public buildings are meant to be welcoming places. They're meant to be actually easily accessible. We live in a democracy in which people should be able to access, as I say, courthouses or parliament or other national bodies. Is the technology changing where that can feel less intrusive? Because I think it is fair to say that certain places have, felt a little fortress-esque.
Yeah, technology is always emerging, and obviously innovation plays a huge part, not only in the static products, if you like, but also the automated products that we and others provide. And I think that's an incredibly important point. Nobody, and certainly from a visitor or worker or a resident point of view, would want this fortress type feel. So therefore, the aesthetics and how that can be blended seamlessly into the public realm is incredibly important. And we are constantly looking at the design, the manufacture and the installation processes with our consultants, with the end users and stakeholders to try and get that balance right. But of course, making sure that ultimately the prevention, the mitigation is at the forefront of the mind as well as the aesthetic.
OK, Richard, we appreciate your time this afternoon. Thank you very much indeed, Richard Ellis there.
Thank you.
OK, you're watching Business Live here on Sky News. Coming up in just a couple of minutes, new data suggests that some non-doms may be leaving the UK, but they're not necessarily selling their homes. We're trying to find out why after this quick break. Stay tuned.
Turkey is burying its dead.
Whole families died in this collapse. Generations wiped out. I'm Siobhan Robbins, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Berlin.
This is just a small sample of the deadly arsenal taken off the streets.
Anyone should say, I'll do that, and then have to go and shoot someone.
Yes.
Sky News, get the full story first.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live.
Live here from Washington.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin. The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks. If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach. This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
Till I emerge, till I better. Flying minutes, fly better. Thank you.
Very welcome back. Now, the exodus of rich people leaving the UK has been pretty well documented over the last couple of months. However, it seems for some selling the home may be a step too far, because new data from Knight Frank suggests that some non-doms in the UK are postponing the sale of their homes, possibly in the hope of a change in government in 4 years' time. Well, let's speak about all of this with Tom Bill. He's head of UK residential research at Knight Frank. Tom, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
So give us a sense, what have you guys found out?
I think we're seeing probably a little bit of everything actually at the moment. There's no doubt that some have already left. Some are sort of along a certain way along that process. But just because you leave, I don't think that necessarily means you're selling your home. In many ways, that's sometimes the last thing that you want to let go of. So while some of the non-doms have left the country and they've taken their tax dollars with them, in many cases they're leaving their home unsold, just in case, just to see what happens, I think. A few years down the line, and for now, hedging their bets.
Yeah, and hedging the bets, because obviously if you sell your home, you have to pay stamp duty, and if it's worth a lot of money, that's a lot of money. And second of all, I assume, obviously they can rent these places out.
That's right. I think that's quite a popular route at the moment. There's often more flexibility with people who perhaps have a second home, and the rental market at the moment at the top end is actually very strong for that reason, both on the demand side and on the supply side. So people are thinking perhaps shorter term than they were before. And if you're a homeowner, the demand's pretty strong at the moment, and so you're looking at that option. But I think longer term, they're just the UK. There's a long list of evergreen reasons that people like the UK and stay in the UK, and so I think taking that very long-term view, I think that means that people aren't going to do anything particularly too knee-jerk at the moment. And
I'm reading that the number of sales exchanges above 5 million is down some 15% in London. Is this primarily London? What's happening elsewhere in the country?
I think overall, the sort of top end of the market has suffered as the new legislation has come in. I suppose, if you like, as the message has been sent from the UK to the rest of the world around how they're going to deal and treat wealth. So I think that market is a little bit slower at the moment. Overall, the market as a whole is very oversupplied, which is putting downwards pressure on prices. But yes, at the top end, it's that much slower given what's going on, given what the government's been saying lately.
And what about for people like you, me, and the people watching at home who, let's be frank about this, don't have 5 million? Well, I don't know, maybe I'm supposing. Maybe you do have a £5 million home. I certainly don't. I mean, is the good news for us, as in, could this trickle down and maybe have a kind of positive aspect in terms of people who might want to buy homes in future?
I think there will be an impact, and the fact is that prices are down around 20%, for example, in Zone 1 in prime central London over the last 10 years or so. So relatively speaking, it's looking like good value, and I think there is a sense that domestic buyers are stepping back into the market because they are sensing that there is value. And so I'm not sure it's going to trickle out to Zones 5 and 6 necessarily in the capital. But it's certainly sort of changing the pitch a little bit in central London. And
just briefly, Tom, this is also the time in which nationally across the UK, house prices are quite repressed at the moment.
Yeah, they are, and that's down to the that's down to the oversupply, should I say, that I was talking about. I think there's various reasons for that. More landlords are trying to sell. We had the stamp duty roller coaster of the first quarter. And I think the recent council tax changes even have had an impact. And so that is keeping downwards pressure on prices.
OK, Tom, we really appreciate your time this afternoon. It is a fascinating story and how these things trickle out to the rest of the housing market. Tom Bill there from Knight Frank. Thank you.
Pleasure.
OK, well, that is it from me on Business Live for this afternoon, rather, I should say. We're back tomorrow morning, though, at 11:30. Do join me then if you can. Up next, it is the News Hour with Mark Austin, including more, of course, on the anniversary of 7/7. The latest as the Israeli Prime Minister is due to meet with President Trump. And also the very latest from Texas as that cleanup continues following those floods. Stay tuned for that. I will see you tomorrow morning. Goodbye.